Hello everyone, and welcome to week 2 of English 200, 201, and 202. This week, we'll be looking at sound and rhythm and imagery in poetry. Please begin by reading chapters 2 and 3 in our textbook, Serious Daring, and read along with the poems that I'm including as part of this lecture as examples. So we'll be focusing on the music of poetry and images, symbols, and figurative language. First, we're going to start off by talking about sound in poetry. I'd like you to pause this video and then watch the video I've included here of Seamus Heaney reading his poem, Digging. Please also follow along with the text that I have on the next slide here. As you listen, what do you notice about how sound is used in the poem? Record yourself reading this poem aloud on your own phone. Then listen back to your recording. How would you describe the sounds and rhythms of the poem? Is it fast? Is it slow? How did the rhythm affect the way that you felt when you read the poem? There are lots of things at work in this poem. There is alliteration. Alliteration is when a similar sound happens between words that are close together in a poem, like snug as a gun. Snug and gun have the same sound. When those sounds are together, your mind puts those words together. There's lots of moments in this poem where you feel the way that he is working with language. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that he's doing. When you write poetry, if you ignore the musicality of it, you're losing one of the superpowers you have in writing it. Sound can convey meaning and mood in a poem. And it's how you create rhythm. It's really something that's going to it's going to give you power in the way that you convey meaning without just the words. So how do you harness sound to create meaning? One thing to think about is poets select words for their sound as well as their meaning. They want to control the way the page speaks to the listening mind. Language is rich and it's also malleable. Why choose the word rock over the word stone, for instance? The definition of rock is the solid mineral material forming part of the surface of the Earth and other similar planets, exposed on the surface or underlying the soil or oceans. The definition of stone, the hard, solid, non-metallic mineral matter of which rock is made, especially as a building material. To you, which word sounds more smooth, rock or stone? Which word sounds more powerful, rock or stone? Why? Why might you choose one word over the other? Now, part of it is the different things that we associate with these words. When we think of the word rock, there's a lot of associations we have with it. So if you could just take a moment, take out a piece of paper, write down the word rock at the top of it, and then another column, write down the word stone. And under rock, start associating things that you associate with the word rock. And nothing is weird. Like, it's okay to be a little weird in this class, okay? Like, let your imagination be free. So when you think of rock, maybe you think of like rock band, or maybe you think of a river rock, or, rocky cliffs, write down what you think. When you think of stone, what do you think of? And also under the rock, think of The Rock, right? The movie star, The Rock, right? He's a rock. Same thing with stone. I'd like you to go through and tell me what you think a stone is, associate with it. Stone coast, whatever associates in your brain with that word. Once you do that, think about why you have those associations and think about when you use any word, it has associations like that. So you want to think of the sound of the word and the associations that it kind of tethers along with it when you use it in a poem. Poets harness sound and meaning at the word level by harnessing words together as well with sound using techniques such as alliteration, right? That's what we talked about just a second ago. The occurrence of the same letter or sound at the beginning or adjacent or closely connected words. There's two different kinds of alliteration. There's consonants. That's the reoccurrence of similar sounds that are consonants in close proximity, and assonance is a repetition of vowel sounds to create internal rhyming. So when we heard snug as a gun, that's assonance. Onomatopoeia is words that sound like what they are. Those are words like buzz, pow, bump, swoop, right? Also some words like window feels like what it is, right? Anaphora is a repetition of the same word or group of words at the beginning of the line. When you use anaphora in a poem, it makes this sort of chant-like feeling and it draws the reader in. There's a famous poem by a man named Joe Brainerd called I Remember, and every line starts with I remember and some very concrete memory from his childhood. I remember getting toys and Cracker Jacks. But it would be, I remember getting tattoos as toys, tattoos of little anchors as toys and Cracker Jacks boxes, right? And it makes you, it pulls you back. And then the next one would start with I remember, and it would take you through all of these things mashed together. It's a great way to induce this kind of feeling in the reader. Another way to harness rhythm is through repetition. So when you repeat sounds or words or phrases or line lengths and sentence structure in a poem, it creates some sort of homogeny in the work. And if you have a single, like in a short poem, if you repeat a word, that makes you that makes it very clear that the writer wants you to pay attention, right? If you repeat a word or phrase when writing a poem, know that you give that word or phrase more meaning if you do so. So be careful not to do so unless you really, really want to emphasize that word. Now I want to give a little note about rhyme. A lot of us come into poetry, especially if we're new to it, and we think that all poetry needs to rhyme. This is really not the case. In fact, in this class, we're going to practice trying not to use perfect or exact end rhymes in our poetry. Like words like love, dove, shove, cat, bat, Rhyme should be thought of, I want you to just think of rhyme as like another element of sound that can be used to create meaning, to connect to words, because you want the reader to connect them when they're creating meaning. You can also use off rhymes like rail and yell, right? Slant rhymes or end rhymes, so rhymes that a little bit just kind of hint at rhyming, to link words together instead. It's a much more effective way. All right, so let's move on to imagery. Images are created by concrete language describing things that you can see, you can taste, you can touch, you can smell, or you can hear. The more sensory rich an image is, the more we, as a reader, can viscerally feel it. Think imaginary gardens with real toads in them. This is something that Marianne Moore wrote about what poetry is, and it's the idea that you can make an imaginary place that is so vivid with imagery that the reader feels like there are real things that live in it. How do you do that, though? One way to do so is using sensory-infused images. Sensory-infused images help the reader enter the world that you're writing. They actually activate the limbic system, so it creates this like physical response in your body, in the reader's body. Abstractions do not convey the specificity of the situation. Ironically, the more specific your writing is, the more powerful it will be. Passive verbs, linking verbs, all forms of the verb to be do little to illuminate language. Other verbs are so much more muscular. So I'd like you to try it. Don't just sit there passively listening to me in this lecture. I hope you're listening. When you're watching these lectures, I hope you have a paper and a pen, just like we were in class. I want you to try out what I'm talking about. Okay, so I want you to write down a word, like for example, eucalyptus tree. But you can think of any tree or any person, place, or thing that you'd like. Now I'd like you to think about that tree and try to describe it using your 5 senses. So here's my attempt. I'm thinking of a eucalyptus tree, and I think that I'm looking at it, the bark is red and raw, it's wet with the dew of dawn, the trees look like thin fingers reaching back to the earth, reaching to the sky, the leaves are as alert as an antenna, the smell sharp as high winds, medicinal like a hot bath, a cavern of calm water. Taste. I'm going to pretend. So with taste, you don't actually have to be able to taste this, right? So you use your imagination if you were to describe what it could taste like using other words, right? Not actually, you don't have to go taste a eucalyptus tree, okay? I imagine it would taste dusty and long traveled. It would taste like the belly of old ships. It would taste like the desperation of farmers. Touch. Bark that can be smooth as glass or rough as a deep sea and strong. Sound. When I think of eucalyptus trees, I hear the cry of wind and the whisper of leaves. So go ahead and take a moment to do this for yourself. See what you can come up with. The other thing I want you to think about is density and doubleness. And I alluded to this a little bit before. When a word, image, or idea has more than one meaning, it raises the intensity of feeling suggested by the poem. Denotation, we saw this when we were talking about stone and rock. Denotation is just the basic dictionary definition, the kind that suggests words correspond in a one-on-one fashion with objects and gestures. A table is just a table. Connotation, on the other hand, is the more complex range of associations and subtle implications of a word. So I'd like you to try it. Think of a word like lake. This is where I want you to stop and, you're going to do your own. After I do this example, I'd like you to stop and take a moment, pause the video, and do your own exercise. So think of a word like lake. Look up the definition for the word in the dictionary. I looked it up and it says a large body of water surrounded by land. But next, I want you to think of all the connotations you have about this word. These connotations can be cultural or completely personal, like a memory you have or a story you've heard. A good way to tap into connotations is to do a free write or a timed writing exercise where you write down everything that comes to your mind about the word continuously for 5 minutes. So I'd like you to do that with the word lake or with another noun that's kind of plain vanilla, like the word lake. Here's just a really short free write that I did on the word lake. Blue, deep, drought, camp, cold, hula pie, water ski, canoe, hike, deep, sunken stones. So I just kind of let myself go. You see I repeated a word. It's not a big deal. Just kind of write down everything I associate with a lake. Okay? So right now, pause the video and think of a noun and look it up in the dictionary, write down the definition, and then spend 5 minutes, set a timer for 5 minutes and just write down every association you have with it. So just to talk about kind of the superpowers of imagery in poetry is figurative language. And 2 of the main ones are metaphor and simile. Metaphor is when you assume states of comparison between 2 things without acknowledging that comparison. So my electric muscles shook the crowd. Her hair is seaweed and she is the sea. They have a piggy and a fishy air. The bees shouldering the grass. Simile makes a comparison between two things using like or as. His teeth rattled like dice in a box. My head is light as a balloon. I will fall like an ocean on that court. So in order to understand metaphor and simile, you have to think about the two parts of it, and that is tenor and vehicle. Tenor is the subject of any comparison. So in this comparison, my uncle is a toad, or my uncle is like a toad. My uncle is the tenor. The vehicle carries a host of associations back to the tenor. So the word toad carries all these ideas back to your understanding of the word uncle. So in this case, toads are slimy, green, ugly, floppy, squishy, loud. Maybe you love toads, maybe you have different associations, right? So when you're writing, ask yourself, does the word toad convey the feeling you want to convey about your uncle through all of those associations? Maybe instead you try, my uncle is a snarling stray cat, or my uncle is a deep blue lake, or my uncle is a towering elm tree, right? Try it out. Two other forms of figurative language that I'd like you to try out this week are allusion, and that's where you make a reference to a piece of literature or a piece of art, very subtle reference in your poetry. Allusions are often used to summarize broad, complex ideas or emotions in one quick, powerful image. And personification is when you give human attributes to a non-human thing. Like if you make a tree have human, arms, or a feeling, right? All right, now it's time for you to write. We have 3 more exercises this week and a formal exercise for you to complete. This exercise is called 5 Directions to My Home. Juan Felipe Herrera, whose poem is To the Left, writes about the feelings of his house in his direction poem. When he tells you to begin at the yellow grain hills where the broken speak of elegance, he sets the scene for a poem where he's trying to paint his home through the emotions of it, and everything around it, the hawk, the red earth, make him feel. In the end, he even breaks his own rules by giving us 6 directions instead of 5. Here's his poem, 5 Directions to My House. 1. Go back to the grain yellow hills where the broken speak of elegance. Walk up to the canvas door, the short bed stretched against the clouds. Beneath the earth, an ant writes with the grace of a governor. Blow, blow, red-tail hawk, your hidden sleeve, your desert secrets. You are there, almost, without a name, without a body. Go now. I said 5 like a guitar says 6. So I'd like you to try to write a poem about your home by giving us directions on how to get to your home emotionally, okay, not physically. Start by telling us where your home is, but don't give us the address. Instead, think about the environment around your home and how it makes you feel. Write specific things you can name that would somehow feel the way you feel when you are going to your home. Tell us how to enter your home and tell us what your home feels like when you enter it. Tell us what is under your house. Maybe literally like gophers, earthworms, soggy soil, limestone, or emotionally, maybe there's a ghost of stories. Name an animal you hear at your home. What could it be telling you or us? It doesn't have to be a real animal that's there. It can be imaginary. What does it feel like to be in your home? And then end by breaking a rule. I wrote this poem after the fires in 2017 using this exercise. Directions to my home since the firestorms 2017. Follow the ash heaps, the hills arching their black skin. History hums like a refrigerator underneath. You should have listened. listened. These days the sky, bruised cloud sky, is obscenely open. Look closely enough and you can see up her skirt. Look for the door in the mountain, steel tooth, sealed with wax. They say spring in all her glory. They say the quick and the dead. They say bright green stitches will rewrite this landscape. Will we know it? Dump trucks heaving with debris. Hawks circle, catching thermals. A drone humming on the horizon, taking pictures of the dead. Will I always be afraid of a warm wind? All right. So enjoy writing your first journal. Journal 5 is going to be fun. I'd like you to play with sound. You're going to create a faux translation using sound as your guide. Here are 2 different ancient languages, ancient Greek and Latin. Hopefully, I want you not to understand these languages if you're going to do these exercises. If you do know both ancient Greek and Latin, please choose another language. Preferably one that is really hard for you to even understand what the words mean. And what I'd like you to do is look at each word visually and associate it with something. It can be that the shape of it reminds you of something. It could be the sound of it reminds you of something. And I want you to make a poem based on free association of each word. I want you to try to get really weird, and I don't want you to make sense. You don't have to. I mean, you can, but you don't have to. Let this poem let you connect at a total sound level. Okay? So give it a try. It doesn't have to be something that's gonna, I want you to, this is an exercise, right? This is meant to stretch your brain and be weird. Okay, the last exercise this week is called Ode to a Common Thing. I'd like you to read and listen to Pablo Neruda's poem, Ode to Salt. It's on the next slide. An ode is a celebration, and in this ode, we will be celebrating an ordinary object. I want you to choose your own ordinary object to celebrate. It could be a fork, a tulip, an apple, or even an iPhone. I'd like you to observe what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it smells like, what it tastes like and feels like. I'd like you to look up its dictionary definition, and then what are all the definitions of this word? What is its history? And then what are its connotations, right? Set a timer for 5 to 10 minutes and free associate all of the connotations that you can think of in regards to this word. What are the secret stories that are hiding in your word? And then I'd like you to write a poem that's at least 30 lines long, so a longer one, where you explore all of this. Here is Ode to Salt by Pablo Neruda. Instead of me reading it to you, I'd like you to click on this link below and you'll hear a famous poet named Philip Levine reading this poem. Finally, your formal assignment for this week, I would like you to take one of your writing exercises that you've done, and I'd like you to revise it. And I have a list of ways for you to revise it. I want you to think of, have you started with a concrete image or a series of images rather than an abstract idea? So kind of make sure you don't have words like love or hate or envy. Instead, use images to replace words like that. Have you gotten rid of all the cliches? The words that you always see in our culture, right? Have you chosen the best words for what they mean? Go back and look at each word and make sure. Have you chosen the exact word that's going to really make us feel something? Have you used metaphor, simile, and other figures of speech to create layers of meaning in your work? Make sure each of your poems has at least 1 or 2 metaphors or similes in it. Does your title contribute to the meaning of the poem? Do you have a title? You must have a title. Have you read your work out loud to yourself? And if so, what does it sound like? Do your line breaks contribute to the meaning and rhythm of the poem? The line breaks at a certain point. Remember, that word carries more meaning. Have you used repetition of sounds and words and other patterns without going overboard? Is there alliteration? If you are using a form, which we're not really doing yet, so don't worry about this one yet. We'll worry about it next week. So once you revise it, I want you to make sure you go back and review grammar and spelling, really important, and then type it up and upload it as a formal assignment number 2 under the assignment. All right, that's it for this week, you guys. It was really great getting to know you in the introduction discussion forum, and I can't wait to read your work this week. I will be giving you comments on your work probably later in the week, and we'll be moving next week into formal poetry, like the sonnet, and then we'll also begin learning about creative nonfiction. So have a great week. I look forward to seeing you online.